I wish that someone had told me this isn't your fault, you know, and that you're going to get through this, just having that, even if you still stay sick and you still, because we are, but there's a way through, and here's help with that. So that's why this podcast is so important to me, to be able to give that to other people.
Welcome to Rarely Discussed, an American Porphyria Foundation podcast with your hosts, Andrew McManamon
And Nicole Castellano.
We both have porphyria, which is a rare disease. As scientifically different as rare diseases can be, we share many similarities on how it affects our lives.
We're here to open the discussion and give the porphyria and rare disease community a safe place to connect, learn, and heal. Being rare can feel lonely and isolating, but we're stronger together. Let's take a journey as we share our personal stories and have meaningful interviews with porphyria and rare disease experts and the patients and families impacted.
We'll talk diagnosis, treatment, misdiagnosis, managing daily life tips, ways to cope physically, mentally, and emotionally, and everything rare. Welcome to the first ever episode of Rarely Discussed, where we're going to jump into just why we're doing this, what porphyria is, talk about rare diseases and everything in between. But before we jump into all that, I figured, Nicole, you could talk about what porphyria is, being as we both have it.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so porphyria actually is not a single disease. It's actually a group of 8 inherited genetic disorders and they differ considerably from each other. Many have acute and cutaneous symptoms. The kind that we have is the only one that we're not sensitive to sunlight. And a common feature in all porphyrias is the accumulation in the body of porphyrins and porphyrin precursors, which are normal to have in the body, but in porphyria, they accumulate and it causes problems. So which types of these chemicals that actually build up depend on which type of porphyria you have. The term porphyrin and porphyria are actually derived from the Greek word porphyris, which means purple, and purple is our awareness color for porphyria. And also some porphyria patients may have reddish purple urine due to the presence of these excess porphyrins in their urine. And it can make it may actually turn darker after putting it in the sunlight. That's like a do-it-yourself test. You can put your urine in the sunlight. Like I said, it's broken down into acute and cutaneous porphyrias, depending on the primary symptoms. There are 4 types of acute porphyrias: acute intermittent porphyria, hereditary coproporphyria, variegate porphyria, and delta aminolevulinic acid porphyria, which only 9 cases ever have been reported worldwide in the history. So, and they've all been men. So that one we don't talk about a lot because it's ultra rare.
Right.
So the cutaneous porphyrias are Porphyria cutanea tarda, which is actually the most common type of porphyria and the only one that can be acquired. That's not necessarily genetic. There is a familial form and an acquired form. Hepatoerythropoietic porphyria, which is also very rare. Congenital erythropoietic porphyria, which is 1 in a million people have it. So it's, again, very rare. And erythropoietic protoporphyria, which is also related to X-linked protoporphyria. And that is very common as well, and shows up in childhood. Usually the cutaneous ones show up in childhood. The acute porphyrias, like the ones that we have, Andrew and I both have acute intermittent porphyria. Those usually show up later in life or around puberty or after that. And usually it's triggered by something. Most people that have the genetic mutations for porphyria do not actually have symptoms. So that's kind of interesting. So that's just a little bit of a lowdown on it.
Yeah, and I figured since it's the first episode and everything, we would just talk about why we're doing this. What's the reason for this podcast? So I guess in your perspective, what is your story and why are you a part of this?
So my story, it took me over 12 years to get diagnosed, and in that 12 years, I almost died 3 times, and I was in a wheelchair for 2 years. There is testing for porphyria, but because it's rare, doctors don't think to test for it. And so the other thing about porphyria is it's called the little imitator. It looks like a lot of other things like Crohn's disease, fibromyalgia, because it can look like psychiatric symptoms. The acute porphyria is like the one we have. And so your lab results, the normal lab results like MRIs and blood tests that people and doctors do usually, this doesn't show up. So my experience was going to doctors, going to gastroenterologists, hematologists, neurologists, pain specialists, endocrinologists, just any type of doctor. I had overnight, I had 9 abdominal surgeries, one of them being a hysterectomy that I didn't need because they said that was the only thing that could get rid of the pain. So going through that long period of diagnosis, I never gave up. I always had hope because I knew something was wrong with me, even though they were telling me everything was fine. And I understand that doctors don't think of it. So I instead of being bitter that it took so long to get diagnosed, I chose to say how wonderful that I did get diagnosed and I did make it. And because of that, it lit a fire in me to kind of say, I want to create awareness about it. So I started talking about it. When I was first diagnosed, the first thing I heard of was the American Porphyria Foundation. And there was a book by a woman named Desiree Lyon, who actually founded the American Porphyria Foundation. So I read this book. And after 12 years of feeling like I was completely in the dark, I read this book and I had an instant connection. I'm like, this is exactly what I've been going through. And finally, like I was like, you're not crazy, but when you don't meet anyone, you don't hear about it. Just having that connection, even with someone I hadn't met, just a book that I read, it made a huge difference for me. And in that moment that I read that book, I thought to myself, when I get better, because I saw that it's possible to get better. When I'd asked my doctors at first, they said, we don't know, here are the treatments, but we don't know, you may have to do it for the rest of your life. We don't really know. We don't know enough about it. So when I read that book and I saw that she had started a foundation and helped so many people, I was like, no, you can get better from this. So that was my goal, was to just keep on trucking through. And it took many years to get better where I could work and things like that. But when I read that book, I thought, when I get better, I want to share my story, because I know how much Desiree sharing her story helped me, and it made me feel less alone. And so that's where my initiative to kind of to share my story came from. And so since then, I did kind of like you. I've done a lot of stuff on social media, and then I started volunteering for the American Porphyria Foundation. And then I was on the board for the American Porphyria Foundation, just as a volunteer again. And then just getting to know more about it. I was asked, as Desiree was retiring, to become the new executive director. And so I did some training for over a year with her. And I'm so happy to do that, because that moment when I said I wanted to help other people, here I am, and I'm able to do that. So for me, it's very fulfilling to be able to help people and create awareness, so other people don't have to go through 12 years of hell. Or the average delay to diagnosis is 15 years for the acute porphyrias. A lot of the cutaneous porphyrias, like, because it's just sunlight related, it shows up a lot sooner. So we really try to, now we have a lot of genetic testing. It's a lot easier. So I feel like my job, by sharing my story, is to try to help doctors think about testing for it, or patients asking their doctors to test for it. If all the normal things don't pan out, that porphyria may look like. So that's basically it, and I'm really happy to be doing it.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. And I think it's so cool that we have this collaboration between one another, because your diagnosis took so long and you went through every terrible thing imaginable to come out like this. And then you have me on the other side, who I had a physician's assistant be like, that's porphyria, where it just came out of nowhere. It was just hardly a week or two into it, and I just had this bad experience on a family vacation, and I went and he's like, we should look for porphyria. And just as we've discussed, it's just the rarest thing there is. And for him just to like pulled it out of his hat and
I
say,
I literally have
that's
chills right now when I hear that because it just makes me so happy that you didn't have to go through as much. Of course, what you did go through was still, it was extremely painful and horrible, but I'm glad that you didn't have to go through that.
and that's part of the reason why I wanted to jump into this and spread awareness is because not only did I throw out that video last year with Porphyria Awareness Week, and the reason I did that is because I felt like you said, there's so much that you could say about this that could help so many people, and it's something you live on a daily basis, but if you just set a camera there and record it, you don't realize how many people you're actually helping until you have a flood of comments of people saying, "Oh, this helped me so much. I got genetic tested. I did the blood work. I did this. I did that." And I'm finding doctors and going through the American Porphyria Foundation to get all this and general guidelines in the ER room. So many different things that are helping these people that started as zero and maybe spent 2, 5, 10, 15 plus years trying to find it. So I think that's really the main reason in as a short story as to why I'm doing this too. So.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that you really did touch a lot of people, and I'm so glad that you did that because it was a bit of a whirlwind. I know for you, you got a lot of people asking you questions, and it just goes to show you how much of a difference one person can make. You know, a lot of times I've thought over the years, well, I'm one person, it's a rare disease, who's really gonna, listen to it, right?
Mhm.
And it just goes to show that through you and me in our separate ways and our separate journeys have been able to come here, and hopefully through this podcast we can, identify new patients, help them get diagnosed and treated properly, because we're going to have a lot of experts on the podcast. And also it's interesting, as we both discussed before, we have so much in common with other rare diseases. Porphyria is very, very rare. So many people, one of the most, besides the pain, is the isolation
Mhm.
and feeling alone. So when we think about rare disease as a whole, there are 300 million patients worldwide that have a rare disease. It kind of just saying that makes you feel less alone. So
Right.
that's why I'm just so glad. I know that's for both of us, even though we have different reasons for, or different ways that we got here, our reason to do this to help people and spread awareness is the same. And I'm just really hoping that we can do that.
Yeah, and I think this podcast is going to be so important for people because there's obviously the stigma out there for mental health where it's more talked about these days, slowly but carefully. But then there's that aspect, but then there's the people with rare diseases who don't say anything. And I think that's a complete other stigma altogether. So I'm glad that we have this space where we can just talk to each other about anything and everything. Because I think when it comes to rare diseases, when you Google search it or figure something out, it's usually a pretty stuffy video that's scripted and goes over all these terms that nobody knows, and you just can't connect on that
Yeah.
level. So I think I'm looking forward to building this connection with everybody that can relate to it. So I'm excited for
And
sure.
I am too. And another thing to think about is when you look at rare disease as a whole, mental health is a huge thing. But in porphyria, we have 3 FDA approved treatments. So we're very lucky. I mean, we have a long way to go, but there are so many rare diseases that don't have treatments. They don't have general testing guidelines. Patients are really left out in the cold, and it's up to the patient to really advocate for themselves, ask the questions. Um, I hear from patients every day. We have a free genetic test that we give out so they can see if they have porphyria. Many doctors won't even order it because they just don't know what to do with it. And it's not their fault. This is something that just doesn't come up a lot. So I also know, or I hope that, through this, our, our, our podcast here is to educate doctors and let them know, yes, it's rare, but it's not
Hmm.
that difficult to test and treat. It's just thinking of it is the hard part. And actually for our Porphyria Awareness Week this year, our slogan is Think Porphyria, because it really is so important to just think. Um, another member of the American Porphyria Foundation. We both know Claire Richmond. She's an advocate,
Hmm.
and she just did for Rare Disease Week. She said, a lot of doctors when they hear once they see something, they hear hoofbeats of horses, but we kind of call rare disease we're zebras because we're a little bit different, and so it's
Right.
just about thinking about that. And I'm glad we're gonna have that space too, where people it's a lot of internal struggle, especially when most people grow up saying, you look at doctors and they go to school, they're very knowledgeable. And when they say you're
Hmm.
fine, you actually, even if you're not fine, you actually start. I mean, a lot of people do. And I did a little bit, even though I kept my hope going, but you kind of go, what, if they're telling me I'm okay, like, what's going on here? You do second guess yourself. And, and that's something that all rare diseases have as well. So I'm just glad that we're going to be able to really put porphyria awareness out there, but also connect with all these other rare disease patients, because really in the end, it comes down to just being there for each other, advocating and supporting each other.
Yeah, and like you said, when it comes to rare diseases, of course, finding the diagnosis is one thing, but with people living with it day in and day out, having a group of people that you can relate to, I think is it almost feels like it's just as important. Of course it's not, but it feels that way, especially when you're living with something like this for life, and maybe there's something that you do that I can relate to, or whatever it may be. So I think sharing the struggles and just getting deep with some of this stuff, I think is going to be very beneficial for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing too, that what you just said reminded me is that, even when you go to an expert or a doctor that's been educated on porphyria knows what to do, because at the American Porphyria Foundation or the APF, we do have experts that can consult with regular doctors to help them. It's good to know what you have and how to treat it and what the triggers are to stay away from. But then it kind of ends there, right? That you
Hmm.
don't have that support group, like you said,
Right.
managing your daily symptoms and everything, and all those feelings that you have that are you just for me a lot of I've always been before porphyria. I was an honor student, I was a pilot, I was a world-class athlete. I was just out there, like I just wanted to just live life and just eat it up and embrace it. And then when I got sick, I couldn't. I was grateful that I was still alive and that I got diagnosed and everything, but so much of my self-esteem had been tied up into my accomplishments. And that's been one of my biggest obstacles, to try to love myself for who I am and not be feeling good about myself because I accomplished a lot of things that society says, oh, you're very productive. Good job. You're doing a great job. It's hard not to feel like that. And I literally feel when I talk to other patients, when we connect on that level and we talk about that, because sometimes we know that it's obvious, but we don't really say it, or just really talk about it. Um, it it's such a release to go, it's true. I have porphyria, but it's not who I am. And when you're talking to other patients and you have these conversations where you feel comfortable to talk and to open up and get vulnerable the way you did in your video, that's why people connected with it so much, because you really got down and said how you feel. And I know it wasn't easy. It's not easy to get vulnerable. Um, you know, to this day, when I tell my story, I usually start crying, because it's emotional. It was a big thing for me.
Hmm.
So I just hope, like you said, to have this space for people and to know that we're not just our rare disease or porphyria, and we're here for each other to talk about those tough things and even if someone doesn't get vulnerable openly, if they see other patients on the show and caregivers on the show, if they can still connect with it, I think it's still very helpful in that respect.
Right, and that's even what I've gotten a few comments on my videos of people saying that's exactly what I wanted to say, but I didn't really have the words to say it. And I think that's very powerful. And I think going back to not letting Porphyria define you, I think honestly it was that video and just getting more involved in Porphyria, being on the member board and just jumping in with both feet was something that helped me tremendously with it, because initially in the beginning of it, I did let it hugely define me, just like I said in the video. It was like, even without the chronic pain and something that a lot of people that are facing just the worst of porphyria, and me not having it, it was just all in my head, really. Just saying, I have porphyria, you know what, my life is horrible, life sucks. And you wake up every day just like telling yourself that, and then it just, by then you're digging yourself this hole. And when I put that video out there, and how it related and it resonated with people and what they said, and it was like, wow, you know what, this doesn't define me. I can shed awareness with it and help people. So I think that's really the main thing, like I've been saying, is just the fact that I just have to say what I go through, and throw a camera in front of it, and it helps at least one person. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters to me.
No, that's great. And what was the moment that kind of shifted for you when you said, I'm going to take these feelings inside and kind of put them out there? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think just for the longest time, I felt like I was pretty hard-headed, and just, in society, just that stubborn male that really can't voice emotions. I think that was something where it was like a few life events, and I'm like, you know what, this isn't good. We should probably change this. So the Porphyria video was like, wow, this is going to be my debut to sharing my emotions, and that's what I threw out there. And I was like, hey, that actually wasn't so bad, and I helped people in the process. It was kind of hard at first, but now I feel like the conversations are a lot easier now,
Yeah,
where I could just talk to my parents, or talk to my girlfriend, or talk to whoever, and just be like, you know what, I'm struggling today,
right.
and it's okay. It's not a hard thing to say anymore.
And I think too, another thing, since we're talking about what to expect, during the rest of this podcast is, um, certain things work for some people and they don't work for others. So, a lot of things that we say, or that another patient or caregiver or doctor
Hmm.
says, it may, or mental health professional, it may work and it may not. And that's why it's so important for as many people to share, because the more ideas that are in the pot, everyone kind of pull from that and try things to see what works for them. Um, a big thing, for me, obviously staying away from triggers, but, I have a lot of high energy. You know me, I'm just like always going and all over the place. And so to meditate, to quiet my mind, and, it helps me get centered, to remember. I said, oh, I learned to love myself and not be attached to my accomplishments, but it always is creeping in, because I was like that for most of my life. And now I'm making that change, just like you said. It gets easier the more you do it, but it still
Hmm.
creeps in. And so I like to always bring that up too, because I think sometimes when you hear someone say, oh, I'm doing so much better now because I did this. And then if someone else tries it, they said, well, I'm still struggling. It's like, I would, don't you agree? I mean, like you said, we still struggle every day. I mean,
Hmm.
because it took so long to get diagnosed for me. One of the things, you do get chronic symptoms. You get permanent nerve damage, neuropathy, um, in addition to the acute attacks that come on, which, you try to manage, and you learn how to
Hmm.
manage the triggers. Like for me, it's, um, alcohol. If I'm being around, I've never smoked, but if I'm around someone that's smoking, um, there are certain drugs that are safe and unsafe, and we have a list of those on our APF website. And for me, sleep. I can
Hmm.
pretty much sleep anything out, so, but that may not work but insomnia is a huge thing with porphyria. So, that adds to the problems. And also, so if you can't sleep, that's not going to work for someone. And sometimes I can't sleep. I mean, I remember when
Hmm.
if I think of days in the hospital, um, just where you're just like kind of the cartoon when they have the toothpicks in the eyes, you're just kind of
Right.
like, it's horrible. And that's the only way your body can heal. And so, um, I, avoiding the triggers and trying things, and I'm just excited to learn what everyone else is going to share in the comments, what works for them. So if we can kind of
Hmm.
build a community around this, so we can kind of share and have, resources to download and things like that. And when we do have mental health professionals and other porphyria experts and rare disease experts on, just kind of getting that conversation here going and that connection so we can all learn together and know we're all different. I mean, we are all, every human being is rare, we're all different from each other.
Hmm.
And I think even someone that doesn't have a disease like this can relate because everybody struggles. And so I think a
For
lot
sure.
of times we can take what helped us before, like if you're someone that wasn't sick and then you got sick like you and me, we were just going about our lives and then boom, it just everything
Hmm.
changed. You can try to take some of the things that helped you overcome your struggles before, but I found most of those things were just pushing myself to get things done. And I used to be able to just push until I got something done. That is the worst thing for me to do. And it's something that I still try, my body or my mind tries to go there. And then I have to recognize and be aware. That's not what we do anymore. Just go to bed. That's what's going to help here. I know
Hmm.
I think to myself, I've got so much to do. I don't have time even for treatment. Um,
Hmm.
right. You have to get back to being grateful for, knowing what it is and having our awesome community. I mean, it's just, and I think we have such a, did you find this? Like the first time I met other porphyria patients, it was a strong, like immediate connection. And
Hmm.
because you know that they actually know, one thing I say a lot is friends and family, and your loved ones, they love you so much, they understand and they want to help in any way. But unless you actually go through that pain when you feel like you're dying and you can't stop throwing up and you've got this chest pain, you can't breathe. When you just
Hmm.
know that somebody knows exactly what that's like, it's a very strong connection. And I think that's why the support groups and things like this work. We don't even have to be in person. It's just such a strong connection um, to know that someone else really understands, what you go through.
Right. And I think, yeah, the community has helped so much, and I've gotten so many messages and people telling me their stories, and I was like, okay, I wasn't ready to bawl my eyes out today, but I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think one of the most important things that I can throw this way because, like I said, we're on the spectrum where I got diagnosed quick and you got diagnosed way later, and I think what's going to be important to keep telling people throughout this podcast is comparison will always be the thief of joy here. And I think if you're comparing yourself to what you're capable of versus what I am and everybody else, and I think if you just can make a goal that you can attain and get through it, no matter what it is, maybe it's going down to the mailbox or maybe it's doing 500 steps around your house, whatever it is for that day, if it's something you shoot for and you can build on, I think that's really the main thing. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
Andrew, I honestly think that may be the most important thing that we're even saying is comparison. And I kind of was saying that just now, but the way you just put it is good. I think also to compare to ourselves to who we were before we were sick too. There's so,
Hmm.
comparison is never good, but I can say when people go, oh, you're working full time and you're doing great, you
Hmm.
look great, you're fine. I'm like, I'm in a really bad pain right now. I'm gonna be having treatment today, as we discussed
Hmm.
earlier. So um it took it took 10 years of consistent treatment to get to the point where I could get like that.
Hmm.
And having the mindset, it's so easy to get in that hole, dig yourself in that hole that you were talking about. And I'm really hoping that, we can help pull people out of that hole or, give options that they can use to do that, because that's something that I always say, when I get sick, my first thing was to judge myself and say, you should be able, before you used to be able to do this, get up,
Hmm.
do it. And then, so like you say, you're already in a hole because you're not feeling good. Then you get deeper and then it takes
Hmm.
longer to pull out of it. And even the symptoms of your attack take longer
Right.
to pull out of. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and it's just such a double-edged sword because I mean you were talking earlier about, oh, I did this, me being self-employed, I accomplished this in business, did this, but it's like, but I have porphyria. And then you dwell on that, and then there's also the part where you're trying also not to push yourself too hard, and just like you were saying about your experience and being like, okay, I can't push myself that hard. I need to just go to bed. And that's something that I'm still struggling with today too, is just working, or doing whatever, trying to fill my schedule, make the most of it, and just saying go to bed. So that's something over the past, I would say, year and a half, 2 years, I've been focusing a lot more on vitamins, nutrition, as much physical activity as I can do, and just making sure up here is all good.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, then porphyria is sneaking its head around the corner and it's going to send you in another attack. So
Yeah.
that's something that I focused on. And actually, so as of recording this, it's April 10th. So April 17th will actually be my 2 year anniversary since having an
Wow.
attack. So just because I made some of those lifestyle changes, obviously I'm not saying that people can just do that and they'll offset theirs. I think there's a lot more to each person as it's all individualized, but I think you just really need to commit and be disciplined to really focus on yourself and figure out what works for you and how you can avoid those triggers. I think, unfortunately, it is, in a sense, a trial and error thing. I know, obviously, I wouldn't go down the list of triggers for porphyria and try it out to see what happens. I'm definitely not recommending that.
Right.
But I think if you just avoid those and then you just really pay attention to what your day to day looks like, and if an attack does happen and you do go into the hospital, just just figure out, retrace those steps and figure out what it is. Because even for me, I was able to trace back all my attacks and say, you know what, sickness and COVID were definitely not my friends the past couple of years, and that's what sent me into the hospital. And I think, just from my experiences, and I know we talked about this too, is just go in and don't try to fight through it.
Yeah.
And that's something that should be heavily reiterated, I think. And because I've had an attack at a hospital where I didn't get the treatment for porphyria, and I did with it, and it's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just going through it, you're miserable, and of course they didn't know too much with the staff I had at that time, and they were just pumping me full of pain medicine, which
Yeah.
offsets everything.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I think, just going back to what you're saying, I think it's just important to pay attention to yourself and really pay attention to those symptoms that cause those triggers. So,
Yeah, when you're talking about being self-employed, I was always self-employed. This is the first time I've worked for somebody else or not my own business. And
hmm
I had to make the decision. I mean, I was in the hospital like I remember 1 month, 15, I was in the ER 15 times in 30 days, and I had a moving company and my guys were great and I would just go, just like go into that stomach pain. They'd run and get my purse, get me some water, get me my pill, we had it like down. But when I got really bad, I had to choose. Do I keep my business going if I do that, the stress is pretty much gonna kill me. I was already very close. So I had to make that decision. And I felt like
hmm
the biggest failure, but I also knew that that's what I had to do. I thought, it's money, it's your pride. And if you don't
hmm
live through this, you can have that all you want. You're not gonna be here. So, that was something, it really messed with my head, because we don't have control over it. And when you learn, you have knowledge, you do have more control once you recognize what the triggers are and things like that. But, it's if you don't have a place to go to learn those things and to try things and to hear about other people, and see what's possible. And, what's possible for one person is never gonna be what's possible for another person. And another thing about porphyria is, you know, why it's difficult to diagnose is even with acute intermittent porphyria, which we both have, we've had completely different experiences. We have some of the same symptoms when we're ill, but everybody's different. And,
hmm
there are a lot of chronic symptoms that I didn't even know about, until much later that, oh, this is it. I was talking to Claire last night and she's like, I didn't realize that, oh, this is attributed to my porphyria. Sometimes porphyria patients, we think everything's, from the porphyria, well, our symptoms that we have, because you can have other things and, that are affecting you. But sometimes you go, wow, I didn't realize that this is from the porphyria. It's just been a part of me for so long. So, I'm glad we're gonna be kind of bringing that up too, to kind of, not dispel myths, but to kind of talk about everything, from just nutrition and just like you said, supplements, it
Hmm.
may not stop an attack, but it's still gonna
Right.
keep you stronger or healthier for, and like you said, it might be different for everybody. Um, but it definitely helps. It may not be the one thing. Like you said, we're not saying go take some supplements and then you'll be fine. But
Hmm.
we're not physicians. We'll never give medical advice on this unless the only one that's giving medical advice will be the physicians that we have on. But um,
Right.
it's interesting to know that there are other things, stretching and meditation and certain types of things. And so I'm so excited to give that to people and hear from so many other people what those things are, and get them out there.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And I think going back to what you were saying, that conversation you had with Claire recently and you learning something, what would be something that you wish you knew before you were diagnosed?
Well, first of all, I wish that I had been diagnosed a lot sooner. I just have to put that in there. I have to say that, but I guess what I wish that I knew was that there is a map through this. There is a way through. Um, the internet wasn't what it was today. I was diagnosed in 2006, so it wasn't what it was today. We didn't have as much access to things. That's
Hmm.
why that book really changed my life that I read, that Desiree wrote. Um, and I asked them, I said, will this be the rest of my life? They're like, I don't know. Now I know that the answer is still the same. We don't know, but what are the
Hmm.
possibilities? What are,
Right.
what's out there? What is possible? And just, I wish that someone had told me this isn't your fault, you know, and that you're gonna get through this, just having that, even if you still stay sick and you still, because we are, but there's a way through, and here's help with that. So that's why this podcast is so important to me, to be able to give that to other people.
Hmm. Yeah, and right. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better, really. It's just there's at the beginning of it, and I said it in my initial video is okay, now my expiration date is set. This is what's gonna end it. So it's just easy to think that way in the beginning, and
Yeah,
there's not in that moment, there's not really anything in your mind that says this is going to be fine. It's just something else you got to maneuver in life. It's fine. And your mind doesn't tell you that at the beginning. It just says, you know what, this is the end. I'm never going to be able to enjoy life. I'm never going to be able to go out. It's never, but it's making the most of what you have and not, like we said, comparing yourself to other people's situations and just learning as much as you can. And I think, honestly, that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm, as weird as it sounds, grateful for with Porphyria is and I said this in my first video, is I've always leaned on doctors to, give me the answers. I never questioned it. And of course I would never say anything bad about doctors or anything because this is a rare thing. I mean, they don't teach you this in doctor school. So
I mean, have you
they
ever
just don't
been in the
teach you it.
hospital and you have like medicals, they're all coming in and going, I've not, where's one page about it in medical school? I want to, tell me what it's like, it's kind of
Mhm.
funny. You're like, okay.
Yeah, and it's a crazy thing, and I think it helped me learn to ask questions, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that people can do that they can pull away from here, along with comparison, is you just need to keep asking questions because you can't just always accept something that's given to you or your treatment because it may not be what's good for you. I mean, like we've been saying, everybody's different.
Right.
You may not jibe well with what this is and somebody else might. So I think asking questions and of course being a part of this community and this group to learn as much as possible. So not necessarily to jump in because somebody commented do this, but maybe bring that up as a question to your physician when you go see them next and just kind of go from there and let it be a topic of conversation. So I think just being able to connect that rare doesn't mean impossible is going to be something that I hope doctors are seeing this, and it's something that they can pull from this. So,
And what you were just saying, it made me think how, I know this and it's obvious, but how scary is it? Even when you, first of all, the doctor's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I know what that was. And I know that maybe sometimes they doubted there was anything wrong because it went through about 10 things like, we figured it out. It's your thyroid. You need to, it's just this. And then it was something else. And I'd be all say, oh, good. And then nothing changed. We have to do a hysterectomy and you'll have no more abdominal pain. And then it actually was worse because surgery is one of the triggers. So it's scary when you hear your doctors don't know. And even when you are diagnosed, like the question I asked, so what do I expect? We don't know. See, that's
mhm,
another reason I think why I felt so alone is because I didn't have anybody to talk to about that, and I didn't have anyone to tell me what to expect. They were doing their best. They're just, we've done a lot. I mean, we've been around the American Porphyria Foundation has been around for over 40 years, and a lot has been accomplished.
mhm,
It's incredible. And all the research that's being done and all the drug trials and things that are really, really life changing for people. Um, it's exciting and I'm so grateful for it, but it's also, I know we have just so much more to go. And that's why I always try to remind myself and others, we are very lucky because we do have treatments, and if someone can find the foundation and the resources and with the expert consultations and patient community, you know,
mhm,
it's always nice because it always seems like if you're in a group with people that you're talking to about stuff, at least one person is not sick that can kind of lift everybody up and everything. So I think it's very scary to hear, I don't know. The unknown is scary because you just don't know what to expect. And you can try to be patient, but after you've been being patient for a long time and you just don't feel well, when you're not, everyone knows when you're not feeling well, everything is more difficult. So
mhm.
I'm excited to get these resources and all this information out. So when people ask that question and they Google it, obviously the American Porphyria Foundation comes up and there are a lot of other things, but for we're both kind of taking this further by doing this. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity because like your video that you did on your own. I did a couple on my own. But now to really do this officially, I'm really hoping that just, I keep saying it, but I just love helping people and it's so important. And I'm just so glad that this kind of gelled together the way that it did. Because I'm really hoping that's what we both want. And I know that it will
Mhm.
help because just the little things we did on our own were helpful. So, um, and I'm looking forward to learning more. I learn more every day about porphyria from new patients, like even that just, you go, wow, I didn't realize that. So it's, you never want to be excited to have a rare disease, but it's
Mhm.
exciting to know that there is a place for us. And like we talk about, we want to just learn and heal together and be there for each other and have each other's backs. And that's a great feeling, even if there's no answer and there's not
Mhm.
one thing that's going to fix something, at least somebody understands and you can fall back on that. I don't know if that makes sense. I just said a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it, I mean, I don't even know how to put into words how grateful I am for this, to have this platform to spread this awareness and to really be something that someone can relate to. And the thought and the dream that someone can walk in and this whole process be streamlined and it be really easy and nobody questioning, I think is just such a massive but attainable goal that I think is going to be something that I hope this podcast can work towards, because that would just be, I mean, especially for me, I mean, just curled up in that fetal position
Yeah.
with my stomach and everyone asking me questions, or you know what, it's in your head, like, just you can go home, you can leave now, or going as far as doing these surgeries to make that executive decision. I think it's just super important then, and I hope that we can get this as streamlined as possible.
That is a great thing to say. And I also, I hope that we're gonna touch on, like you just said, the surgeries. There's a lot of loss that goes on, loss of your former life, loss of your health. My dream of having kids. That was a huge dream of mine. I wasn't able to do that, but I'm a positive person, so I go, at least I'm here. And it's yes, I lost that, but I could have lost my life. But there is I was speaking with another person that we know, Tasha. There's a grief process to this, and it
Mm.
changes over time. I don't know about you. Now you're only 2 years in. Like for me, it's since 2006, and I kind of look every year. I can look back and go, at the beginning it was, well, maybe this pain doesn't happen as often, or this headache doesn't come as often, or I haven't had to bring my just in case pills with me. I forgot. That means it's not happening as much, because if it was so imperative to have them, I wouldn't have forgotten them. So I had these kind of milestones where I would look back and go, I'm able to take my dog for a walk now, and I can get out of bed. I'm not crawling, to get somewhere, and or needing a wheelchair. And looking back, so then it was being able to work, and then it goes on, and everyone's got their own journey. But we all we all lose a lot, and it's just like, my brother just passed away. It's not as bad as that, but it is the same. It's a grief process, I think. And I'm really hoping that having patients and caregivers on, that we can, shine a light on that as well, that, it's okay. It's great to be positive, but it's okay to feel the loss, and to feel the things that we can't do anymore, to say goodbye to that, to maybe know until later, maybe it's not going to be forever, because
Mm.
my life, it changed, and now it's gotten a lot better, and it's just with treatment and triggers, and just, you kind of, like you said, it's very individualized. You kind of analyze and you go, oh, every time I do this happens.
Hmm.
And so it'd be nice not to have to worry about that. Even that little thing, it's a loss, because you can't just make a decision. You have so many things to think about. Another thing, I know we're gonna wrap up soon, but another thing I really want to go into is, every single patient that I've spoken to, basically I hear this, and it's my experience as well, and I'm sure you can relate to it. When porphyria, especially acute porphyrias, they come out whenever. I mean, I'll literally be just talking to friends and laughing. I'm just like, oh, it just hits. And so if someone says, would you like to come to my birthday party, or come to Christmas, or come to do this, you're like, I would love to. Am I going to be able to make it? I don't know. And that's another thing. I've always considered myself a reliable person in my life. That's something that I had as a goal, to
Hmm.
do what I say I'm gonna do. And that's something that I've lost. I did lose, I couldn't go. I couldn't get out of bed. And at first everybody understood, and then it kind of got like, well, you're not coming, so you don't want to be here. And it's like, no, I need to be around family and loved ones more than anything right now, because I am really not doing well, but I can't make it. Like, unless you guys want to come to my house, right? So,
Right.
I want to let people, I would love to shine a light on that as well, because there's a social aspect too. Like we talk about mindset and mental health, but there's also a very large social aspect. And especially parents, that when they're sick and they can't go to their children's things, they feel guilty, so I just hope that we can find a way to not make it okay, because none of this is okay, but to find a way to manage it better, like we were talking in the beginning, managing the daily life of having this, but it is hard with not knowing when it's going to strike, even if you have waited,
Yeah, and
right?
right, right. And yeah, since being diagnosed in 2018, I listed in my notes like every time the attack happened. So every every so often I'll look back at it and see if I can find a trend in those dates and just figure out when it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, it's like at least for me, and I think a lot of people out there who have rare diseases or have attacks of some kind with porphyria, I think a lot is sitting around waiting for the next one to happen. And I think Yeah, and I think that's when it came to, of course, jumping into the community groups and just talking about it more because before that video came out, I mean, you feel so alone not being able to talk to anybody about anything. And like we said, the isolation happens. You don't really want to go out. I don't really feel like it.
Right.
And even though and it's a double-edged sword again with that because like you need to be social, you need to be surrounded by those loved ones, but I don't want to. I mean,
That's a really good point too. Yeah,
yeah.
I go back and forth.
So
Sometimes
it's
I just want to be alone. Sometimes it's like if I found one of my beautiful things that helps me is distraction. So work is great, but then of course I do too much and then it's too stressful. So it's you're always it's a balancing act, you know.
hmm
It really is like,
right.
or if, you know, I always tell people like, I kind of realized this years back and I know I'm not the first one that realized it, but I was like, what if I just went for like an hour instead of having to go the whole time? Or, you know what I mean? And,
Mm,
or, you know, and just kind of, you know, there are ways to, if you do want to go, and then there are ways to say, I just can't, like you said, I just don't want to be around people right now. And we have an APF book club and we were talking, we have a new member last night and she was saying that she does not want to be around anybody. And another thing that I feel so bad when I hear this, I'm bringing everybody down. A lot of patients say that when because I can't do stuff, I'm bringing everybody down. And, you know, families, especially with kids that have EPP, erythropoietic and X-linked porphyria, um, it affects the whole family. They can't go out and they can't go to the beach. They can't do things. Now, we've got treatments coming down and there's an FDA approved treatment, SINES, that they're trying to get approved for younger people. But for another of our member advisory board people, George, you know, it's changed his life. He takes this and he goes out and he has a normal life and he thought he would never have that again. So
hmm
and the other patient that we were talking about, a friend of Desiree's and mine, and you know about him, he I don't even know how he's still here, and he is just so positive, and he says, you know what, Nicole, you don't know what they're gonna discover next month or next year. And I'm like, you know, so it's so true, you know, we have so much to look forward to. And I think it can only get better.
Right, and I think just piggybacking off that, there's just so much to learn from these veterans that are in this space. I mean, George, for example, like I mean, he makes me want to get on a bike, and I don't really want to.
You
So,
know, like when I ran the
there's
marathon, everyone's like, "Oh wow, you know, you're a runner." I'm like, "I'm not a runner. I was a skater, figure skating, and I was never really good at running. So I'm like, that's and with my personality of pushing myself too much because I really wanted to train. And as soon as I started feeling better, I went to the gym and started training like I did when I was, you know, 18 years old, like, you know, in the top form. And I would get sick and I'd throw up because I would start slow and then I'd be like, oh, I feel good. And then
hmm
I just take it too far. So when I did the
right.
marathon, I I was able to do it and it was amazing. But after that, I was like, I never, like, everyone's like, you can do another one. And I'm like, I hate running. Like, I'm
Yeah.
glad that I did it and it was fun to train.
Yeah.
And the experience was amazing and I loved it. And I think I actually may do another one, but I don't enjoy it. So like you said, it makes you want to go out and ride a bike, but it's like, I don't really don't want to do it. So just let
Yeah.
it go there.
It's just it goes back to just doing what you can do.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And you know what? And that changes over time. And that's another thing I love to tell newly diagnosed patients. It may not be like this forever. Once you know your triggers, you learn your body, you get treatment, you know, you have the resources, you get a medical team that helps you manage everything. It doesn't have to be up to you. I know it feels like that a lot, especially for patients like me, where it took a long time, or Claire, 19
hmm
years. There are a lot of people it takes so long. Even today, when I go to my regular doctor, they're like, I just go, they're always like, what's going on? And I just don't rely on the doctors. Like you said in your video, something that really resonated with me was you're like, you felt like you knew more than your doctors, you know?
hmm
And so with porphyria, I'm not saying I know more than doctors, but with porphyria, with my GP that doesn't really know anything about porphyria, he knows I have it, but I don't ever think of discussing that with him or going over it or anything. And it's just, I had to figure, I kind of, and my mom was a huge advocate as well. And but you know, when I couldn't think and I had the hallucinations and the confusion and stuff like that, you know, she was there to have my back. But it's like, if you can't get that help from where you normally would get it when you go to a doctor or whatever, it's very difficult. And I still see vestiges of that with me, that I just kind of, my first instinct is let me figure it out. And that's of course the worst thing to do, right? You don't want to be like Dr. Google. So I work on that, but I still have that a little bit. But at that time, that's what was necessary, advocating for yourself. And, to kind of, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but I really would like to just tell people the best thing you can do is advocate for yourself, get second opinions, don't give up. If you know you're sick, you're sick. Just go on to the next. It's okay if the doctors don't understand it, because it's rare. They haven't been trained on it. And because it looks like so many other different things, it's really difficult for doctors that don't know about porphyria to think of it. And so, and while you're figuring that out, we're here to support you.
And I think that's the perfect place to wrap up. So I couldn't have said it any better. And I think I just wanted to obviously thank everybody for listening, and we hope that you find value in this and in the future episodes to come. And we look forward to this journey. It's going to be an awesome one.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for listening. And we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. So we'll see you next time.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends, family, or anyone who could benefit. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your preferred platform. It helps us spread awareness, and we would be extremely grateful. You can also follow Rarely Discussed on Instagram, YouTube, as well as TikTok. If you're someone seeking diagnosis for porphyria, visit porphyriafoundation.org to receive a free doctor packet, forms for free DNA testing, and a list of doctors in your area. Stay tuned for more episodes of Rarely Discussed.